Good afternoon, dear guests. I am Dr. Nilufar Aminpour, and I have the honor to invite you to BSBI Open Series that is going to broadcast from Berlin School of Business and Innovation. The topic that we are going to discuss today is the role of democracy in the Industrial Revolution 4. I have invited our Chief Academic Officer and the Provost at BSBI University, Professor Kyriakos Kouveliotis. I'm sure that every one of us knows him well, but I want to refer to some significant points, including his educational background, as he has completed 2 cycles of postdoctorate researches, and of course, referring to the fact that during the last 20 years, he worked as a researcher, a prominent researcher in different research disciplines. Of course, as the provost, he taught in many universities and educational organizations globally in higher ranks as the provost, of course, and he has published more than 12 books and dozens of scientific original papers. Also, I should add that he has supervised more than 5,000 dissertations during these years. Welcome, Professor, to
Thank you
this.
very much for the good words. And now it sounds like I'm really old and senior with everything that you mentioned. I'm thrilled to be here. And I think you picked a really great time to discuss this topic, which is about the role of democracy in modern societies, and especially in industrial revolution. And as you know, we are into a transitional period, not because it's after COVID, but also because there are significant developments in the geopolitical arena globally. So let's kick off, and I want us to have a really open conversation, as it is the essence of this initiative, which is called Open Series. And I hope that our audience and our guest will be left with something at the end of this session.
Correct.
So, how do you want to start? What is the first thing maybe you need to discuss or to ask?
Yes, to start, I would like to ask your idea about the manner that the disciplines of democracy impact the diversity and unity of industrializing nations.
Well, look, if you take into consideration that we're living this transitional period, as I mentioned, and the fact that now we're located in Berlin, in Germany, in the heart of Europe, and in a real multinational, multicultural city, as it is Europe actually, as a whole, um, there is always a certain tolerance in the European continent in regards to accepting and endorsing different ethnicities and people from different cultural backgrounds. A major thing that it has been a debate actually for the last 20 to 30 years, especially within the European Union framework, is whether these people they also endorse and start believing with the common democratic ideals and the common culture that we all need to share, or cultural habit if you want, that we all need to share living in Europe and in, let's say, Western societies. And this is not easy, but at the same time, when this happens, it's an amazing experience. And I can give you the example of our institution, that we have students, member of staff, lecturers from more than 100 nations and states around the world. And we all learn to live together and work together and produce some amazing results and working in these initiatives, and we do all these events, etc. All together. We communicate in English, which is something like a lingua franca, as it is called. But to me personally, and this is what I say to all my friends and to my family, learning, for example, what are the major cultural events in India or in Iran or in Canada or in some African states that I didn't know before, and celebrating with our staff here and our people, That gives me a certain sense of fulfillment that I never had before. And suddenly, my own country, which I know it's small anyway, but it appears even smaller. And this is a lesson that I also want to give to my son and to the people that are close to me. You really need to have this kind of experience. So if you take this and you put it together with the democratic ideals and the values of democracy, for me it's an amazing personal experience.
Okay. I would like to know also your opinion about how these disciplines in democratic countries control or impact the speed of industrial growth.
Well, we are living in an industrial world. I don't want to say we're living purely on a capitalistic world, but definitely in an industrial world. In the past, there were two main revolutions after the initial industrial revolution. There was the revolution of the computers and the revolution of the internet. Now, according to some prominent figures like Bill Gates, the next revolution that we are already experiencing is the artificial intelligence revolution. And if you take these together with this transitional phase that the industry is undertaking now, that can lead us to a whole new world with new professions, with new habits, with the total abolishment of borders and any other restrictions. And some of them, they call it's the end of globalization or the deglobalization era. For me, it's a new type of globalization. The fact that we need to focus on democratic ideals and how these are affecting this industrial environment, it is also related to mainly how people work, integrate, and operate with their colleagues. So, whether you are handling robots or whether you are working in a factory or in an educational institution, you all need to share a common platform of ideals and certain habits. Of course, democracy, by definition, we all know that it started and generated in ancient Greek, and that means it's the right of and the opinion of the many that it should prevail. Of course, there were certain critiques about that, saying, for example, who actually told you that what the many believe is always the right one. But still, then, the actual essence of democracy is that you are all participating into the decision making. So even when you are wrong, because most of the times we are, the lessons you learned and the fact that you are responsible for this kind of choices, even when you are wrong, makes you what we call a real citizen. That means you have a responsibility to yourself and you have a responsibility to the others. Not only to your family, but also to the other citizens that you work and live together.
Yes. In your words, you refer to the public opinion. I would like you to explain a little bit about how the public opinion is different in comparison between the democratic societies and also the more authoritarian regimes.
Um, it's an interesting question. First of all, because the what we call today public opinion, it's definitely different from what we knew about public opinion 10 years ago. There are new concepts and new habits that have been integrated in our world. For example, now we have the so-called influencers, and we have the speed of information coming in a special application in mobile phones and smart devices in a fraction of a second. There is hardly anything happening at global scale that has a significance, and we don't learn it in minutes. The bad thing now, and this is something that we haven't discovered a remedy, is that at the same time you can also receive a fake interpretation of that, what we all know as fake news, for instance. Maybe sometimes fake news are faster than the real news. And this is a menace, not only for the shaping of public opinion, but also for the essence of democracy. Because, of course, democracy allows the freedom of speech and the right that you express your opinion and you can also discuss openly with each other, but at the same time, this has certain weaknesses. And not all people they have the proper education or the proper instincts or the proper ideals to understand the reality, or if there is something that is not correct. And sometimes they digest, let's use this word, whenever it is presented to them. In totalitarian and authoritarian regimes, it's even worse, because sometimes this type of governments even block certain media, and to bring it to another extreme, not just they do not just block, but they are also creating their own fake news. But again, now the world is big, of course, but at the same time it's smaller. And there are channels, and there are people, and there are groups of people that they make this information available even to this type of societies. On the other hand, because of that, and because of the volume and the bulk of information, everything is huge. And this is another problem. So somebody also needs to have the experience to do some kind of a triage, as we say in hospitals. So to select, and this is not easy as well. But the issue with totalitarian and authoritarian regimes, and what we mean by propaganda in the past, or fake news, or how public opinions are shifting or changing, this is something that we should take for granted. It will always be like this. And I think in a little bit we will discuss at a more extent, and I can give you some examples how this actually works at a professional level.
Perfect, yes. Now let's have a touch to a kind of art. I would like to tell you that, for example, in more democratic cities like Berlin, we can see that democracy manifests in architecture. For example, we can see that major values such as inclusivity or sustainability and community engagements are major concerns of architecture in such cities. And as I know that you are an expert designer, I would like to know your idea about this manifestation of democracy in architecture, designing the factories, and in this field, we want to know your idea.
Well, to be honest, I always wanted to study architecture. I mean, when I say always, after I discover what I really want to do anyway. But and I think I will have the chance to do it before I start retiring. But this is something that I have a personal interest. And Berlin actually presents an amazing challenge for all those that they want to explore architecture and art. And I don't have to mention the Bauhaus movement and all these cubism and postmodernist buildings and all this, because it's apparent and everybody knows. But at the same time, when you walk around the streets of Berlin, and if you have the clarity and the peace of mind to understand how this blends into the environment, and the open spaces it creates, and all these acute geographical structures, and what that means internally for each one of us, then if you really love architecture and the arts, you can understand a lot. And this also has to do with how people think. They always say, for example, that people in Germany, they always follow the rules. Sometimes they don't like to think out of the box. Actually, the word box is used a lot. They have certain structures that they need to follow, but look at the architecture. It depicts exactly this type of framework. So nothing is happening without a reason. And architecture always used to grasp the era of which it has been developed. I will give you an example using probably one of the most famous structural and architectural buildings in the world, which is the Parthenon. None of the columns or the structure of the buildings or the bricks or anything like that is a straight line or 100% with symmetry. No, it doesn't. Even the columns, if you project them some kilometers up to the sky, if that was possible, you see that they will meet. So they are not vertical position. Why is that? Because the ancient architects, they actually managed to grasp some deficiencies that your eyes have. So to have the perfect harmony, that means you not always have to be straight and precise.
Yeah.
So these are the two different schools of thought, for example, from what you see with this rigid and strict building with the straight lines and the ancient wisdom, let's say, in architecture. But for us in modern societies, the environment that we live is very, very important. And you can see, even in new buildings, there are lots of open spaces. And this is not random. It signifies certain things. It gives you the opportunity to open your horizon, to open your mind, and start thinking about other ideas. It's like an open brainstorming area. And lots of modern architecture um, is on that. Also, in regard to the flexibility on how you construct the sites. So you may need to change the interior of a building easily. So all these are also significant moments in our civilization and on our times that we need to have this type of flexibility. That's what I think on this.
It's great. We cannot deny the role of parliamentary system on industrialization. I would like to know your idea about it.
Well, national parliaments, in regards to provide some solutions how the industry should operate, of course, this is something basic. And as you know, in Europe, we also have the directives of the European Union. So the countries somehow they are attached to that and they cannot deviate a lot sometimes. And what the European Union did in the single market in particular is let people communicate, live in different EU member states. So it's what we say the free movement of people, capital, goods and services. And that actually, this is actually based in what we call the acquis communautaire in the EU, so that all these people, they share these common values, also the values of democracy,
Yes.
and a certain types of legislation and rules. So national parliaments in this domain, let's say they have less power than they used to have 50 years ago, but at the same time, you share common legislation patterns and common laws around Europe. Of course, in other countries it's different, in North America, in South America, in Africa, and in Asia. But in our neighborhood, let's say, I think we are fine in this domain. And parliaments, up to a certain extent, they really serve people. And most of the legislation, of the new legislation, especially for the protection of the environment, which maybe it came too late, but at least it came, it's for the benefit of the people.
If I'm not mistaken, you're referring to the voting system that individuals can send their representatives to the parliament, and in that way, at least they can fulfill their desires. Yes.
Look, the whenever we have elections, and this is actually the top landmark of a democratic process, and this is why we're also being responsible. Socrates used to say that even if no political party or a leader you actually feel he or she represents you, you still need to cast your vote.
Yes.
Why? To have this sense of responsibility that I told you. You need to be responsible, not only to feel. The easy thing is not to go to vote or throw a white ballot or something like that, but then you feel in that way, okay, it wasn't my decision, I'm not responsible, I didn't vote for them. You need to be responsible as a citizen. And to be a citizen is one of the most important personal responsibilities for you as a personality. And I will give you this example that I mentioned in regards to public opinion because it is related to the elections. Somebody wondered how these companies, for example, these PR companies, they save the electorate and what they do. let's say that in Germany we have three major political parties, and it is me and you, and we want to create another one. But we don't have so many resources. We are unknown. We don't have any other political ties. Anyway, we are new kids on the block. What we will do? What you actually need to start with, it's a very good PR company that they have experience in elections and how they shape the public opinion. So what they do, they say, okay, in the news, when there are docu-series or when there are interviews in the radio and television, they are start putting you in the frame. When they ask people even on the phones or in this kind of interviews, they say, okay, did you hear about the new Nilufar and Kyriakos political liberal party? Of course, nobody have heard us. But they are gradually putting us on the frame. So when you see all these surveys and you see, for example, one party 36%, the other party 25%, and at the end it goes down, and then what they do is they take these other parties or everything else that is left, and they say Nilufar and Kyriakos party 0.5%. The moment they put your name there, and then they start the personal telephone calls and the other surveys, you are in the picture. Yes. So and that was constructed, that was artificially made. Yes. So expand this and extend this 1 million times with people calling all the time and with interviews that have been pre-arranged on television and the radio, and then you can have a picture. How Emmanuel Macron was elected in France started from what? From the social media. So this is also a sign of our times. That doesn't mean it is negative, but we need to know how this is generated.
Yes. It is related to the idea that occurred to me to ask you about. This 21st, of course, is the era of digital revolution. It occurred to me that, okay, these are positive aspects and there are also disadvantages. For example, who can guarantee the information that people do not want to share with other people, or relating to democracy, who can avoid these influences on people?
Well, look, even the biggest and the most respectable mass media, such as the BBC, for example, they had cases that they were mishandled or without their knowledge, of course, they provided wrong information and so on. And we briefly discussed this before, but this is one of the significant effects that education has to people. When you are educated, and you have been taught by your lecturers how to avoid certain pitfalls and what to look when you receive some kind of information, and how you should handle all these different web pages. It's on you really, and how you want to embark into that to start detecting which is true and what is not. You will never know. Yes. But and then it also depends how much time you have to explore all this. But sometimes you need to trust your instinct and your education. So you can tell. Not all the times, but that was the same always. Before it was just the radio or the actual newspapers. Now we have all these digital means. We have the influencers, as I mentioned before, and you have the social media as well. You have these short and fast videos like in TikTok or in YouTube that you can hardly grasp or edit this in your brain. So the flow of information is coming in frames all the time. But still, nobody's perfect. We always need to have this feeling of selection, what to do, and we need to take it from there.
In this relation, of course, from your words, I understand that inequalities will happen. I would like to know your idea about the fact that how modern democracies can learn from earlier industrial revolutions not to face these inequalities.
I think from the after the medieval ages and via the Renaissance and the Enlightenment years and the first industrial revolution and how we moved, we have made huge steps of progress, especially in how people work, in labor rights and in citizens' rights. And I think everything is better and better as we approach the next decade. But still, there are many things we can do. Um, I prefer that when people work to feel secure, safe, especially in this period, but at the same time to respect the rules and their colleagues and the environment they work. Um, what we experience now as active members in a society and active professionals and educators, I think we are very fortunate. If you think what were the labor conditions, for example, in the first industrial revolution 100 years ago, um, I think we're experiencing in regards to labor rights probably one of the best periods in the history of humanity. Um, on the other hand, there are many challenges. There are new things that the world is not yet prepared. A major change is what artificial intelligence will bring because we don't even know yet. Lots of professions are going to change. I'm not going to say abolished because it's completely different. For example, when logistics as a part of management was introduced, let's say 20 years ago, as an academic discipline, and people start studying that and they did postgraduate studies and even undergraduate studies, it was, let's say, very trendy back then, as it was 30 years ago, human resources or human capital. But now we are having even robots do the warehousing or even the procurement or these kind of processes. That doesn't mean that these studies were lost. That means we need to be flexible, to be prepared in our lives to change professional route at least 8 times. And to have this type of flexibility, you need to think, for example, okay, I will not study logistics, but I will study a master course how to handle a robot on a warehouse. This is how it will go. So, new uncharted era, new flexibility that is required, and also at a personal level, maybe every day we need to do a SWOT analysis to ourselves. Faster than with what we should have done, let's say, 10 years ago.
Let's go back to the concept of democracy and the manner democracy contributes in industrial development. What is your idea about it?
Well, as I said, democracy is attached to how people should work, operate, communicate, and interact with each other. The fact that the industrial evolution, or what is coming now, if you want to call it the Industry 5.0, or Artificial Intelligence 1, or the Globalization 3, it doesn't matter. Still, it provides a platform that is, let's say, widely acceptable globally, up to nearly 100% at least, by those people that they can enjoy it, of course, and it provides a platform how we can operate. Like all good things, it has also deficiencies. But we have the luxury in a democracy to discuss these deficiencies and live with them and try to do our best to provide some remedies. But this is our world. And if you look at the history of humanity, lots of people were sacrificed for us to be able to have this conversation right now with the different ethnic backgrounds that we have in a different country. And I think that 70 years ago, it would have been impossible for me and you to have this conversation right here. So that's my perception.
Yes. Professor, the topic is really interesting, but not to take your time more. And to sum up, I would like to know your idea as the last part. What are the challenges that democracies face in the fourth industrial revolution?
I think today the biggest challenge is that the fact that everything happens too fast, too many events, and too fast, and we don't have the time and the clarity to comprehend all this and start editing them in our minds, so to see where we go, what we need to do, and plus because of this speed, everybody's more stressed. We also have the fear of the unknown. I mentioned the paradigm of artificial intelligence. Um, my answer is always relying to the individual. So I think the good and the bad, as John Fowles used to say, it's within us, not outside.
Exactly.
And when we have these dilemmas, or when we are skeptical, when we face the unknown, we should first have a very deep conversation with our own. And if we believe in democracy and democracy is within us, then we can project it to the people we love and we work with. So we should always see the glass half full and not half empty. And as I said, remember all the steps that humanity did in order to reach the stage that we are now.
Yes. Professor, thank you very much for this useful and magnificent conversation. I would like to ask our guests whether they have new ideas or challenging debates that want to be discussed. As you know, Berlin School of Business and Innovation has the word innovation in it, and we are open to accept your ideas. Thank you very much, and I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you.